Can you tell me about yourself?
Yes. So my name is Shivam and I belong to Haryana and I have completed my computer science engineering from Chitkara University, Punjab. And after that, I am been working as a front-end developer from last 2.5 years, I'll say. And that's like about my kind of journey. And the tech stack I'm working on is basically JavaScript and frameworks related to JavaScript like React.js and all the other third-party libraries that are being used for making web apps with React and Next.js mostly. So this is a little bit about me.
Okay, can you tell me about your project?
I have worked on various kind of projects related to different kind of clients. Like, for example, I have worked with about pharmaceuticals also, where I have created some kind of UIs where which can be used to analyze the CPK and PPK analysis for calculating the shelf life of medicines. Other than that, I have also worked with that is basically an insurance provider all over the international insurance provider, mostly used in Americas and Europe areas. There I worked on the application where it was being used internally as a data marketplace, centralized data marketplace, and mostly these kind of applications. And I'll say front end of also I have worked with Bridgestone where I have created a marketplace, some similar data marketplace with some good, I will say, employees performance tracking system. So these were some kind of projects I've worked on. Other than that, I've worked on some kind of backend projects also in Node.js, but majorly on frontend.
Okay, let's go for JavaScript first. So, what are closures?
What are closures? So
Yeah.
basically, closure is nothing but the ability of a function, or I will say ability of some method, function, variable, anything to get the lexical scope, means the outer scope. For example, in function, we are using any kind of variable, console statement, or anything. When we are using this, so it captures the outer. It not this. It captures the variables that are declared in the outer scope, means its lexical scope. So this ability is basically called closures.
Can you tell me one real example that you use closure in your project?
One real example of closure that I've used in my project.
Yes.
So most people I will say with this, as I've told you, I worked with this Aegon. So there we were building an application where we were defining some kind of classes used on the function prototype inheritance, because it was an old project and there the classes were defined in that manner. It was like, I will say, 6 to 7 year old project. So there when the functions are defined and inside them some kind of variables are defined and some other methods basically local to those functions are being used. So when those methods are used to make the class, or to make the instantiation of that particular object, and they want to capture those local variables, then the closure was the one thing that helped us at that time.
Okay. What are event loop in JavaScript?
So event loop is the basic execution process of JavaScript. So what happens? There are, if I say in a little bit pictorial way, so there are two things. One is call stack, then other is the web API, or I will say some kind of area where JavaScript processes all the functions that are asynchronous. Then there are two kind of queues, that is microtask queues and callback queues. So what happens? As you know about call stack is a thing that works on last in first out phenomena. So JavaScript interpreter will start reading line by line, and then whenever it will find any asynchronous task or some kind of special web API implementations provided by the browser, like set timeout, set interval, or something, it will pick them up immediately, will take out of the main not callback, call stack, and put them in the web API. Now, when the JavaScript will go through the complete main page, the main thread will be completed, then they will come again to the not to the web API, they will come again to the microtask queue and the callback queue. If the things which went to the web API, they got completed, their time got executed, they will come to this microtask queue and callback queue. So first priority is given to the microtask queue. It will check it. If something is there and it is in the order, because queue is like one after another. So whatsoever will be present first there in the microtask queue, it will pick it up. Then we'll go to callback queue, will pick the things present in there and will execute them. If things are still not there, they are still in the web API, are still under processing, it will wait. It will go keep on checking them again and again. And in this way, JavaScript completes the full execution of the program or the method you have written, whatsoever it is. So it is the event loop.
Okay. What is difference between promise and async await?
So according to me, this kind of thing, promise is basically some kind of thing in the JavaScript that says, okay, this function is going to stop there because you have made it promise. So whatsoever had been made as a promise, that will go to the web API and microtask queue, as I have told in the event loop. But what async await will do, whenever you want to bind any other synchronous task with any asynchronous task, then what you will which had been put in the promise, so what you will do, you will use async await. So for example, there is a normal function where you are doing some kind of API work, but you want to do that API work behind the scene, and you don't want to stop the execution of the main thread. So what JavaScript will do, you will put that, you will make that function asynchronous by using the async keyword, will do the API functioning there. But before writing the line for fetch code or Axios code, you will type the keyword await and will write the other lines of code in the same async function. So what will happen? JavaScript will when JavaScript interpreter will land to that function, it will see, okay, it is an asynchronous function. It will keep on going through the other part of the main function, but that async function will wait for the promised API call, and because of the async and await keywords, and as soon as they get completed, that particular thread which was responsible for executing the API call will be joined with the async function, and all the line of code that was after await in that particular async function will get executed. So I will say promise is the baseline for async and await. They're not different according to me. So this kind of thing.
Okay, what is the difference between Promise.all and Promise.all settled?
Yeah. So Promise.all and Promise.all settles are two kind of ways where we handle different promises. So for example, if there are 10 API calls, so what you will do, you will put them in an array. Now, after putting them in an array, you can pass them through Promise.all or Promise.all settled. What will happen when you will pass them? It will collate all the promises into one promise, and now you can do what? You can again use the async await and type the await keyword before that call, and the whole program will wait until those 10 calls get completed. But there is a key difference between both of them. That is, if you are putting promise.all, then if there an API fails, it will throw an error right away. It will not let the program to execute, and it will stop the JavaScript execution. But if you are using promise.all settled, then what will happen? It will show, it will give that, it will wait for all the APIs to get completed. If an API fails for that particular API, at the index of that particular API, it will show that this API has not given the result. It got failed, but it will not stop the JavaScript from being executed. And that is the key difference between promise.all and promise.all settled.
Okay, what is difference between call, bind, and apply method in JavaScript?
So basically, call, bind, and apply method, all of these methods are straightforward. If I say methods to provide this scope to two functions, but they are used differently in different cases. For example, if I talk about call, so you can literally write a function and say that this dot call, and provide the scope of an object to that function, and it will start using its scope. But and similar is the case with apply. But there in both of them there is a key difference. If the call is if the function you applied call on is taking some arguments, you will pass those arguments as just simple arguments, like comma separated simple arguments in the calls parameter after the object. But in apply, you have to pass them by array. Now the third thing is bind. Bind's role is to preserve this keyword mostly whenever you are using call, bind, and apply. So let me tell you how it works. For example, if you are using two objects, and one object's function, you want one object to borrow some function from the other object, what you will do? You will say, okay, object one's function dot bind object two. Now what will happen? The object two's this scope will be binded along with the object one's function, and whatsoever the things it is getting from object one, if they are present with the same keys in object two, they will be easily accessible in the function. So this kind of method borrowing being provided by bind. Bind helps us in other way also. For example, if you are using normal function or any other normal function, so what will happen? If you provide it as a callback function, this keyword is lost at that time. So at that time, if you use the bind call, then what will happen? This keyword will not be lost. With whatsoever the object you have bind the method, it will be preserved, and you will be able to access them in the callbacks. For example, in set timeout, set time interval, or another function you have created a kind of custom function. So these things at these areas it helps.
Okay, what is invariant?
So invariant is nothing but invariant is basically a kind of condition that is present in every programming language. So if I talk about invariant, it is a condition that holds true for the whole execution of the process or the execution of the complete module or the program you have written. For example, in looping, the central thing, the condition you write, for example, this particular variable ranges between from this to this. This kind of condition will hold true until the complete loop executes. So this kind of thing is called invariant. So if I tell you about the practical usage, so I will say like in most of the third party libraries, there are some kind of invariants, means some kind of conditions that are being provided as the global condition, like this must hold true if you want to execute this, if you want to execute this library. So those things are called invariant for those libraries. So basically it is nothing but the condition that will be true always for the whole program.
Okay, okay. What is Nullish collection?
So Nullish coalescing is basically very good thing provided by the JavaScript where it handles if something is null or undefined. Basically, if you see, for example, whenever we are dealing with some kind of APIs or we are dealing with some kind of objects that can have data but cannot have data also. So what we can do, we can simply write, okay, if uh, the value, for example, object one is having some kind of key that is x. So if say object one dot x is equal to this, not is equal to this. Like for example, if you want to put the if you want to console that, so what you will write console.log object one dot x, and then you will provide double question mark and type what thing you want, what string or what thing you want if that x in object one is null or undefined, nothing other than that, not falsy values, not zero, not this empty string, just null and undefined. If null and undefined are there, then it will give you the other value on the right side of the double question marks. So this is nullish coalescing. And I will say like it is a very good thing because previously people were using only logical or operator to deal with these kind of conditions. And that time logical or operators will see the falsy values also, as I have told, zero, empty string, and these boolean values false. So nullish coalescing operator is a very good thing whenever you want to deal only with null and undefined.
Okay, let's go for TypeScript. What is difference between type and interface?
What is the difference between type and interface?
Yes.
So inter interface is basically a kind of object that is like that is provided by this TypeScript to provide modularity over the type values. So for example, if I say, according to me, it is a basic kind of object where you can do different kind of things. For example, extension like interface, it can be easily extended, but in types you were required to do the and keyword and those things. And interface define, for example, it is based on the basically class structure as we used in most of the object oriented programming languages. It is based on that thing, and types are not very good. They are kind of heavy functions, I'll say.
Okay, what are generics?
So generics is a very good thing provided by TypeScript. That is basically, for example, you are creating any type or interface, and at that time you don't know what kind of type can be there, but you know that these particular from these particular types you want to put any type. So or you want to make it generic for every kind of type, whatsoever the type comes, whatsoever the interface or type comes, it will be able to handle that. Then you use the generics. There you will declare like, okay, I am giving a particular variable or a particular kind of alphabet or a string literal that will be there, and in the place of that you will be providing the type whatsoever you want, and you can use it with any type. For example, if I want to make an interface, for example, I make an employee interface, I can write the syntax like this: interface, then angular brackets t, then in the curly brackets go on writing and using the t whatsoever I want to use with the t, and then whenever I will use the interface, I will just provide, instead of that t, I will provide the type I want to use there, and that interface will be easily workable with that particular type. So to provide type independence, we use this JavaScript generics.
Okay, let's go for the React. What is React Fiber?
React Fiber is basically an I will say an uninterruptible execution executable plain JavaScript object, if you ask me. So it is what React Fiber is nothing but I will say the whole rendering phenomena of React. It has made it such a way. it has made it in such a way that the whole execution process can be broken down in different threads, and those threads are nothing but called fibers, React fibers. And and each fiber node will be nothing but a basic reference of a particular component, where it will be holding all the reference to the DOM for that component. It will be holding all the cache for the use callback and use memo and other memorizations that are specific local to that component. And it can be interruptible. It is interruptible also. And the React will do what? React will break up all the process of rendering in different fibers. They will execute independently. React will also be able to provide them precedence. For example, there are some kind of things that are needed to be shown in the input, or they are needed to be displayed on the input. So those things will be given higher precedence, other will be given less precedence, and the multi-threading will happen behind the scenes in that way, and whole rendering process will be completed. I will say Fiber is nothing but just an independent executable plain JavaScript object that holds the complete component definition, not only the definition, each and everything for it. That is a fiber. Else.
What is use memo and use callback in React?
So use memo and use callback are two functions. Basically, I will say hook that are used to, I will say, memoize the variable declaration or function declaration if they are computed from some kind of expressions. So what is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is, if there are some kind of variables we are making in a module that are dependent on some kind of state data. We don't want some kind of state data for a variable or function that are dependent on some kind of state data. Then in that case, we don't want, whenever the component renders and the state variables they are depending on, they are same. Every time they should not be computed again and again. They should not be the whole, I will say, computation should not run again. So in that case, what will happen? You will bind the whole variable or a function in the use memo or use callback correspondingly. And what will happen when the re-rendering will happen? Whatsoever will be present in the dependency array, you have to provide all the dependencies in the dependency array of use memo or use callback. Then when the component definition will be created again on the rendering, it will be memoized. Now, as I've told you, the fiber node holds the cache for this use memo and use callback locally. It will see, okay, these dependencies are changed, then only it will run the computation again. If these dependencies are not changed, then it will do what? It will go to the local cache in the fiber node. It will take the variable in the case of use memo and the function in the case of use callback, and will return that right away instead of running the whole computation that was required to a variable or function. So basically, for memoization process, these things are used.
Okay, what is use layout effect?
So use layout effect is something that is similar to the use effect, but the execution time, I'll say execution time is different in the case of use layout effect. I'll say use effect runs when the browser paints the screen, but the use layout effect runs when the browser have not painted the screen. What does it mean? It means that whenever we run the use layout effect, it means that all the JavaScript, means the DOM tree has been created in a JavaScript DOM object, but the browser have still not put the things in the screen. But use effect will run when the browser have put all the things on the screen. So basically, use layout effect should be used in the cases where we want to do computations or we want to do calculations, where we want to check the layout of the browser, layout of the things, and we want to do some things before the browser paint the screen, so that there should not be any kind of flicker on the screen. At that time, use layout effect should be used. If we want to do something after the screen mounts, after the screen is visible properly, for example, after the component mounts, we want to show the loader and run the API. In that case, use effect should be used. It is the basic difference in the execution timing.
Okay, what are cleanup function?
So cleanup functions are basically something that is used to get rid of memory leak. So in the use, how can you make them? You can use the use effect, and in the use effects return statement, you can write some function that will be deleting the memory from the JavaScript functional modules, or not JavaScript, React functional modules. For example, you have created an interval, a timeout, you want to clear that timeout at the end, and those things you can do that in the cleanup function, so that there will be no memory leak.
Okay, what is render phase and commit phase?
Yes. So basically, as I've told, as we were talking about fibers. So what happens in React, the whole rendering process happens in two phases, render phase and commit phase. So now what is there? During the render phase, it gathers all the information, all the kind of batch rendering and those processes it do, and it creates two fiber tree, that is work in progress fiber tree and other is current fiber tree. So what happens during the rendering process, it gathers all the changes in the states or all the changes that are needed to be done in the DOM in the work in progress fiber tree. They are then in the commit phase, they are passed to the current fiber tree. And after that, during the commit phase, that fiber tree is compared with the DOM. Whatsoever the changes are there, they are passed to the real DOM. So I will say in render phase, the React gathers all the changes, information, updates, each and everything in the JavaScript objects, or I will say in fiber work in progress fiber tree, that is nothing but a JavaScript object implementation or tree implementation only. And then in the commit phase, it puts that in the what is that current fiber tree and then compare it with the real DOM and put that on the real DOM. So these are the two phases in the React rendering process: render phase and commit phase.
Okay. What is the difference between server-side rendering and client-side rendering?
So the basic difference between server-side rendering and client-side rendering is that client-side rendering is something which we are dealing day by day. That is basically all the things, all the JavaScript bundles, HTML bundles, CSS bundles will come through APIs in the browser, and the browser will not paint. I will say browser will make the complete UI after that. So that is client-side rendering, means the page is rendered on the client's machine. But what happens during server-side rendering? On the server only, all these things are gathered, the HTML page is created, and that page is directly sent to the client so that the rendering happened behind in the server only and the page is sent to us. So this is the basic difference in client side and server side rendering.
Okay. What is the benefit of functional component over class component?
The benefit of functional component over class component, I will say basically functional components are much better than class components because in React they provide modularity. The Reacts make it easy to use the functional component. It makes it easy to use the functional components with the help of hooks because hooks provide a much easier, cleaner, and I'll say cheaper way for React to do the things instead of like binding each and everything with a class constructor and then the instantiations of that. That is one thing. The other thing is basically less boilerplate. I will say less boilerplate code will be there because in every class you will be writing component did mount, will mount, and those things. But instead of these, you will be writing just simple hooks here. Whatsoever is needed, do the things in that and performance, as I've told, like all the things like tree shaking and those things, memory allocations are easily handled in the functional components, and they are still, I'll say, better than the class components, and they are future proof also because many libraries and like I will say server side rendering and in many libraries server side rendering and client side rendering functions are like capabilities are being written keeping in mind the functional components and providing support for them majorly. So new frameworks are providing good support for functional components, that I'll say.
Okay, how you optimize the performance of a React application?
How I will optimize the performance of a React application. So I will say to optimize the performance of a React application, we can do various things. So first is the process of memoization. During memoization, as I've told you, we use callback, use memo hooks to memoize the things so that the rendering process will be I will say like during the rendering process it will not go again and like it will not redefine the things again and again, but during the it will redefine them again and again and take the things. Other than that, we can use kind of like we can memoize the whole module. There is a way to memoize the whole module also. We can optimize the state management, keeping the local state wheresoever possible, and multiple instead of doing multiple state call, we can do like a kind of batch state call where we can see like all these processes are independent and they can be executed easily. So put them once. Then we can also do some things like rendering list optimization and those things by using React virtualized and those things, and image optimizations we can do with the help of some kind of third party libraries, and by using lazy loading and those things. Lazy loading, we can easily say that this process will be like this process consume resources of the React and computer also, so we can lazily load them. Like basically we need to reduce the reconciliation or re-rendering work of the React. So whatsoever we can do, we can easily optimize the React application with the help of them.
Okay, what are error boundary?
So error boundary is a kind of safe way to play with the errors, I'll say. So for example, you can create error boundary for different things. For the pages where you want it to load, but it does not load there, you create the error pages which needed to be shown. Error boundary for the APIs, when the API fails, what the things needed to be done. Is it a specific error needed to be thrown at some specific kind of failures or some specific kind of exceptions, or you need to just want to throw a default error that should be there. So that particular handling process, I will say, is the error boundary. Is the boundary where error happens, we will be able to catch it and handle it.
What is lazy and suspense in React?
Lazy and suspense in React. So for lazy, I will say lazy is a way to load the module. If the module is heavy or something like it is having long evaluations and those things, it will load all the JavaScript present in the module, but all the images and those things present in the module, it will load them lazily and do the things.
Okay. Okay, sure. That's all from my end. Thank you, Shivam. Thank you very much.